In this fifth part of modeling better windows in Maya for environment design, we go through how to create arch windows. The first variation is just an arch without an actual bottom portion of the window. And I'll show you how to create this, a simplified version first. Then we expand a little further by creating the arch and then the bottom portion for the window. Then we add more detail in the third variation by introducing more paneling, more glass panels isolated by frames. And then the fourth variation, I show you how to break this out a little further so you have maybe a bottom portion, like a home window being raised, so you have more control. And then I give you a few more options where you can create the frames for the glass as separate pieces of geometry instead of having to extrude them within the wall or within the window itself. So a lot of things are covered in this one as well, and they all build up from the first 4 parts of the series. So if you haven't seen the first 4, I recommend you start there, especially part 2, where we go into how to create fully exterior and interior part of the wall and the window. So maybe a character could walk outside and then go inside, and there'll be geometry there as well. And everything builds up to this 5th part, creating arch windows. Let's do our first variation. This is going to be only an arch window without the actual straight window below it. So it's just going to be that half arch that you see, something like this. So we are going to utilize the circularize technique that we used a lot in the previous video when we did circular windows. I have this wall that we've been using all along. It's 300 in width, 300 in height, and 20 centimeters in depth. So in order for us to use circularize, if you remember, we need to go ahead and divide this. So I'm going to use multi-cut, control middle mouse click, create 2 edges, one vertical, one horizontal. And I'm going to select these 4 faces, and I'm only going to deal with just the front of the wall, not the back. So we're not going to cut this through. But if you needed to cut this through entirely, in order to create the exterior and the interior, you would focus on working with both sides. Then let's go ahead and extrude with offset so we can contain that circularize. And I'm going to circularize this. Let's add divisions to give ourselves more rounded appearance. And here we have the arch. We're only going to need the top half. We don't need the bottom half. So I'm going to ignore the bottom half and we'll fix it in a bit after we are done. But I'm going to select these 2 faces. And here is, let me actually make them smaller. I'm going to select them again, go to front view. And I'm just going to scale them down. And let's just move that up. Something like that. So we have an arch just at the top of the wall. Then I'm going to select these 2 faces. And I can go ahead and do my extrusions and using extrude with offset, extrude with thickness in order to define the arch cutout window or where the window would be. However, if we just do this as is, so let's say we do Control E, we can do thickness. So we have a cutout in there. We can do another extrusion, keep faces together off, do an offset. So now we have a 2 panel arch with windows on each side. But what if I wanted to add a bit more definition and detail? So not just 2, but maybe I want 4 and more panels within this. So let me go ahead and undo. And before I continue, let me go ahead and fix this really quick, just the top. Let me make sure that I don't have extra faces, and I don't. I'm going to use multi-cut. I'm just going to cut this up a little bit more. Just fix this really quick. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to divide this top half with extra edges. So that way I have 1, 2, 3, 4 faces total. So by having extra faces or by adding extra edges, I will have extra faces for me to extrude and add those panels in. So now let's go ahead and select these 4 faces now. I'm going to extrude them inside first. So I have that window area where the window and the glass will be. So let's do negative 10. And now I can go ahead and do my extrusion again and keep faces together off. And let's do offset. And now I have more paneling and more glass. So let's do offset of 2.5. And let's do another extrusion and thickness of negative 2.5. Let's go back to object mode. And here we have our first window arch. For the rest of this, for the bottom portion, we need to clean this up. So we have a lot of floating verts. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to switch over to vertex component mode, target weld, and I'm just going to target weld all of these together. Do them on both sides. And for this one, let's go ahead target weld here. Let's go ahead target weld this one to the top. For this one, we don't need it so high up. I can target weld these to the top and all the way in the back as well. And this one also. If I want a nicer topology, because this doesn't look good, I can recut this and kind of retopologize it a little bit better so it's more appealing. Like so. I can go ahead and maybe remove these two. So it's a little cleaner and nicer. And of course you can do your bevels really quick by selecting all those outer edges and giving them a slight beveled corner. So it's not a 90-degree straight corner like you have, making it look a little nicer for the light to hit. So this is our first variation, just an arch using Circularize to create our first variation. For the second variation, let's create the entire full window. Arch at the top and window below it. Let me go ahead and prep this cube. Going to go to bottom toolkit. Let's do multi-cut. Let's cut this up. And I'm going to make a copy of this and just move it over. So that way we already have pre-cuts before. I'm going to select these 4 faces and we're going to circularize them. Actually, before I circularize, I need to extrude, contain my circularize within offset, and then edit mesh, circularize. Add divisions. And let's do smaller. Let's go to front view. I want to see what the top will look like. I'm going to move this up slightly and I'm going to scale the entire thing down like so. So I'm kind of pre-planning what the top will be and how wide the window below is going to be as well. But I can always adjust the entire window later. But let's say I want this size right here. So the top is done, but we need to deal with the bottom. We need to make these faces or these vertices and edges straight. So we have a rectangle or a square right below it. So to do this, I'm going to switch over to vertices and I'm going to select these verts right here. Actually, let's see. Yeah, all these verts on one side below it. And I want to make them straight. To do this, I'm going to switch over to scale tool and I'm just going to scale them all together in one axis. In this case, it's going to be x-axis. By scaling them, you kind of squish them together, making them straight. And I'm going to do the same thing for this side. And then let's do all of them below because we have 1, 2, 3 verts in the bottom, which are not straight. So I just select them. And in this case, I'm going to scale them and squish them on Y. So they're straight. Now I need to make sure by taking these verts and I need to make them straight with this vert right here at the top. So all these need to line up. So this is going to be a straight line. So to do this, I'm going to switch over to move tool and I'm going to activate only the x-axis because I want to snap these verts left to right. So I'm going to make sure by left clicking on the axis, it's yellow. That means it's active. And I can hold down V and middle mouse click and drag. This means these verts will snap on the highlighted axis to this vert, but not move them up. They will only be moved on x-axis or left to right. So V, middle mouse click and drag right on this vert, and they will be snapped. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to select these, make sure that x-axis is highlighted, hold V, middle mouse click and drag right over this vertex, and they will be snapped right along that vertex. And now I have straight edges on each side. Now I can take all of these verts and just move them down. That's creating the window opening, depending on how big and height I want this. We'll deal with the ones in the back. We have a lot of floating verts we don't need. We'll deal with them in a bit as well. But right now I'm just trying to get that cut out, the arch and the window below it. There are other ways to do this, but I found using this method is a little quicker than, let's say, trying to boolean with a cylinder and a cube or doing some other way. I found that this is a lot faster and a lot cleaner in the end. Now, before I kind of continue with this window, let me take this one and I'm going to actually duplicate it. I'm going to move this one off to the side. I'm going to duplicate it so that way I don't have to redo this step for all the other variations, because we're going to be getting to this portion for all the other variations. So once I've done it and once you have it created once, just duplicate it so you can just kind of experiment with different variations of arch windows. So I don't have to continuously do this for every single one. Alright, let me go ahead and go to vertex component mode and let's clean this up first. We don't need a lot of these floating verts that were created by Circularize. So I can go ahead and select them and delete them by hitting delete, or I can target weld them. Either way will work. That's cleaning this up. Let me also align these verts right here, as well as the one in the back. So this way, when I'm in front view, I don't get this weird wireframe that can see all the way through. I'm just gonna make it look nicer by just dragging this up. And actually just make it look nicer by actually snapping so this is a straight line. You don't need to do this, but it looks way cleaner when you do this, or when you work with this in wireframe mode. So that way you know which verts you're selecting, and it's not as messy. So I'm just gonna snap along Y to this, so it's not a straight line. And let's do one more thing, which is going to be cleaning this up, these icons, removing them. So before I start cutting things out, adding more geometry in, let's just make this cleaner for all the rest of the process, easier to work with. And I'll probably make a duplicate of this actually, not the one that I did before. So that way I don't have to redo this. And let's do one more, and on this side. And I will leave this as n-gons right here, and we can deal with them later when we are done. And since, let me go ahead and actually just keep these two copies just in case. But I do want to have this one. Actually, this is a lot cleaner, so that I can just jump over to the next one and do variations. And let's do one more. All right, let's come back to this one. All right, now we have our template that we can go ahead and do our extrusions with offset, extrusions with thickness, and so on. So let's keep this as is. And we can do something with this window by just simply selecting the faces and doing our regular usual extrusions that we've been doing all along. I'm gonna select these 4 faces. And let's go ahead and extrude them in, Control E. And let's do a thickness of -10. Then you just have to decide how many of these faces do you want to extrude individually or together. If I select them all 4, I can extrude them, keep faces together off, and let's say do an offset of 5, or maybe less, 2.5. That's creating the windows where the glass would be. And then doing another extrusion with thickness of -2.5. That's having the borders and the panels for the glass where I need them. Or I can step back and I could just do the top first. Control E. Let's do thickness of offset first at 2.5 and then thickness at -2.5. So that will give me only the top portion and the bottom portion. Now we'll repeat the same thing for the bottom 2 faces. Offset at 2.5 and another extrusion, -2.5. So that gives me a different window, or kind of a fixed style, and only upper portion and lower portion for the glass. So this is our second variation. And in this one we created the arch, and we have the bottom portion for the window. And then the interior portion is kind of up to you, depending on the type of reference that you're going off of, depending on how many panels that you want for glass and where the frames will be. For the third variation, we're going to add a lot more detail, a lot more paneling and glass than we had in this one. So for this one, I want to show you that after you've done this pre-prep, you can go ahead and still resize how the arch looks and the size of the window template that you have at the moment. So if I go to front view, let's select the verts. And I'm going to select all of these verts right here. Let me go ahead and deselect the ones in the back. And you can still scale them as long as you are scaling on one specific axis, like all these verts are flat. So you don't have anything in the back selected. You can still scale these on one of the axes. So you can scale them on X, you can scale them on Y, and resize this window template after the fact. So you still have a lot of control. You can even go and maybe tweak how the arch will look. Just selecting the verts at the top and then scaling them on Y. Then let's switch over back to face, component mode, and I'm going to select these 4 faces. And I'm going to extrude them in. Control E, all together. Let's do a thickness of -10. This is going to be where the actual window will be. So we're just creating a portion within the wall. So let's say I want, for these 2 portions of the window below, these 2 right here, I want a lot more cuts to be made because I want panels. I want like 2 windows and a bunch of windows going down. Something like this. So if you remember, that means we need to make extra cuts. We just don't have enough geometry here to extrude and contain all those different panels. We need extra faces. So we need to include many edges. So you have an option of introducing extra edges kind of almost across the entire mesh. within the wall itself, or you can go ahead and extract these faces away from the wall and then work with them individually and then combine it back to the wall, or maybe leave the window as a separate geometry where you'd have the wall and the window. Quite a few options you have of dealing with this. For this example, I will leave it part of the wall. I'm not going to extract these. So I'm going to use multi-cut. I'm going to go back to actually the object mode, select the entire thing, go to multi-cut, and I'm going to hold Control, middle mouse click. This will place one in the center. And now I'm going to do the same thing again. This will divide this across. Hold Control, middle mouse click. So now I have two faces at the top on each side, and then one below. But you can see how it's placing the cuts all the way across. So I would have to tweak this and then optimize it later after I'm done. But if I were to extract the window and deal with it by itself, I wouldn't have to deal with these cuts later. And then I want to make a cut, one line across here, one edge, as well as here. So for this, I don't want to place a cut all the way across my geometry like so. I am actually going to come in here and select these edges. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges right here. And I'm going to connect them with an edge. So inside Model and Toolkit, I'm going to enable Connect. And it will place an edge in between selected edges. I'm going to hit Enter. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Select them all. And do another Connect. So now I have geometry, the faces that I can go ahead and extrude. And it will give me individual glass panels and frames for each of these. And for the arch itself, I want to have maybe 2 panels on each side, something similar to this. So for that, I just need to introduce multi-cut and just go ahead and cut these up. All right, now that I have it pre-planned, I can go ahead and start extruding and see what happens. But I have the geometry there to do this. Let's deal with the top first. I'm going to select these 4 faces. I'm going to hit Ctrl E to extrude, and let's do offset first, 2.5, keep faces together off, and let's do another extrusion, and this is going to be the indent where the glass would be. And now I have to select all these 16 faces. Let's do a little quicker. I'm going to go into front view, select these faces, and then I'm going to deselect everything in the back. So now I should have 16 selected, and I do. And then let's do extrusion, Control E, offset, 2.5, keep faces together off, and thickness for the glass, -2.5. And before I do that, actually let's extrude, and then do -2.5. And here we have an arch window with a lot more panels. That looks pretty good, a lot more detail. And of course, I'm going to be mentioning this, and I have been mentioning, you can go through and not do another pass where you add the bevels, because they really add a lot more definition and realism to your models whenever you do your bevels. So that way you have a nice curvature, so it's not a 90-degree straight corner. If you can afford the geometry, the extra geometry that comes with it. But let's do our fix for this. So we have a lot of unnecessary edges that are flowing across. Let's go ahead and switch over to Vertex Component Mode, deselect all the verts, left click in an empty space, and then I'm going to target weld. Let's target weld all these. Simplifying this. And this one, let's target weld these 2 to the top, like so. You can probably target weld this one, maybe this one, as well as this one. This right here could probably target welded to the top. Yep. And let's target weld this one. These right here all can be target welded, so we have a flat face in the back. And we will just do the same thing for the other side. And of course, one last step, we can use multi-cut and fix these windows so they're not end-gons. Simply by actually not multi-cut, it'll probably be faster if I just select the verts, then go to Edit Mesh and Connect. And then just select the verts again and press G to repeat Connect. And here we are, we have our third variation of a arch window. For the fourth variation, I want to show you how to create an arch window, but have portion of the bottom portion be raised up. Like you have full control of having to open the bottom portion up. Very similar to what we did with the Hun style window in the second part. So for this, gonna go ahead and delete the back, these faces. So since we're going to be opening the bottom portion, these faces need to be removed. Now this version is not the one where you would create the exterior and interior portion. So this is just for ability for you to raise the window, but the back of this would be empty. Like you would not have any geometry back here. So first I'm gonna take these 4 faces. Let's do an extrusion, Control E, and add thickness into the wall. Let's do a -10. And let's do another extrusion, and I want to create a bit of a border within this window. And let's do offset. Let's do offset of 3. And let's do one more extrusion, Control E and -2. So that way we just have an extra border within this entire window. Just adding a bit more extra detail. So for us to have an upper portion and a bottom portion for this straight window, we need extra geometry. So actually I don't need this edge at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and select it and delete it. And for the arch, I am going to keep it because I want to have 4 panels at the top. Something similar that we did right here. So for this portion right here, we need 1 edge horizontally. Now, because I deleted this edge, multi-cut is not going to work. Not in this, not in the window. So instead, I'm going to select the edges. And I'm going to connect them. So that way, creating that single edge. And actually, let me select all of these edges. And connect them with 1 single edge. And then we can deal and clean this up later. I'm going to hit enter. So now we've separated the window for the top portion and the bottom. Now I'm going to select these 2 faces and let's extrude them. I'm going to keep faces together off. Let's do an offset, thus creating the window cutouts where the glass would be and putting extra frames on them. So let's do an offset of 2.5. Then I'm only going to select this glass right here for the top. And I'm going to hit Control E and extrude that -2. So creating the glass and the framing. For the bottom portion, we need to actually extrude the glass and the frame a little further back. So that way, if we raise it up, it won't overlap with the top portion. So I need to select this face and select the frame, all the glass and the framing polygons here, all the faces. And then I'm going to extrude this, all the faces, Control E, and extrude them back. Now the amount that I'm going to extrude, I have to take a look at the side. Because I want to extrude them far back to where I'll be able to take them and extract them and raise them up so they don't overlap. So let's do -2.5. That should give me enough to where if this comes up, it's not going to overlap with the glass at the top. Let me double check again. So it'll be all the faces right here. And it will still overlap, so let's push it back further. So let's go let's push it -5. That should give me enough. So let me move this up. Yep, and that works. Let's try a little less. Because I want to find that sweet spot. I think -4 maybe. So the frame will not overlap the glass. And that should be fine. And then I'm going to select the glass and extrude that with thickness of -2 in. Thus creating the glass and then the frame. So let me take a look at this and make sure. So I'm going to select, let me delete this edge right here. It's going to kind of get in the way. And we actually don't need it. I'm going to double click on this edge, Control Delete. Now let me select just the faces for the bottom and let me check. I'm going to select the glass, grow my selection. And then grow my selection one more time. Grabbing all of the frame. Shift, period. And now I'm going to go ahead and just test it and raise it up. Actually, let's extract it temporarily and see if that works. Edit mesh and extract. So if I raise this up, you can see that it's not overlapping. And we kind of pushed it a little too far, but as long as it's not overlapping with this portion right here, that's what I was going for. So let me go ahead and undo until we attach it back. And actually I can just fix this by selecting all of these verts and just moving them closer until this vert right here is enough to where it's not going to overlap this glass. There's a lot of fine tuning when you are trying to add a lot more detail and variation, where you can move windows up and down, where you have front and back. When you get into more detailed type of modeling, there's just more things to keep in check of, and that's what I'm doing here. But that should work. Now we have the bottom portion, and now let's deal with the top portion with the arch. Let's select these two faces, and actually I want 4 panels, not 2. So let's enable multi-cut, and I'm gonna introduce a couple of cuts on both sides. And I'm gonna select all these faces, and I'm gonna hit Ctrl E to extrude. Let's do an offset of 2.5 first, and let's do another offset. So I'm creating the border first, and then let's do an offset with keep faces together off and 2.5. Actually, maybe I don't even need that extra border, so let me undo back. Let's do Ctrl E, and let's just do extrusion to create the panels right away. So I'm gonna keep faces together off for this, and offset of 2.5. Here we go. And now these line up nicely. And let's do another one, another extrusion and negative 2.5, and push that in to create the glass. So here's what we have: the arch with extra geometry, some paneling, and then we have the bottom and the top portion. Now for this, all I would have to do is just, like I showed you when we were testing, just take the bottom portion and extract it as a separate piece of geometry. So I'm going to select the glass. Let's grow our selection, Shift, period, until it grabs the entire frame. Let's go to Edit Mesh and Extract. Select the bottom portion, the glass, and the frame. It's now one single piece of geometry, while the wall and the glass window for everything else is together as well. Let's center pivot for the bottom portion. Modify center pivot, and just raise it up. And thus we have a lot more detail and variation of our arch window. Now, if you wanted to create, right now this is just an exterior, and if you wanted to create an interior portion, you would have to follow the steps for how to create the exterior and the interior that we covered in part 2. So you would just have to gonna go back, and let's say we wanted to create, let me kind of pull it up. So if you wanted to create an exterior of the wall, and then a character would be able to walk inside and also have the geometry in the back along with the wall, you'd have to watch part 2 on how we did this. But it's just a matter of creating an arch on both sides, not just one, because remember, we did not deal with the back. And if you were going to create exterior and interior of the wall, you create the arch on both sides, so you have also the arch in the back that you can close off. And then you deal with the window by itself, probably extract it so you can deal with it, and then extract the bottom portion, and then close up these gaps, because right now we don't have any geometry. So a bit more work, but we've covered enough in this series where you should be able to do so. And for the last variation, number 5, is remember, you don't have to try to create all these borders as part of the same geometry. You can introduce separate pieces of geometry and then put them in, that would be your border. So if I take these faces right here, let me just select the back. I'm gonna go ahead and extrude, Control E, create where the window would be. Let's do -10. Let's create a slight little border that we can work with, Control E. Let's do an offset. Let's do an offset of 3 is good. Maybe more, let's do for this one 5. And let's do another extrusion with a thickness of maybe -3. That's creating where the windows and the glass would be. And now for the rest of this, we can go ahead and introduce cubes or even pipes, like we did in the circular portion in the last video, and then the last variation we did for the circular windows. Essentially, you create a cube. Let me go ahead and go to front view, and then you just take this cube and begin to resize it and create the borders, like so. So this might be 1. Then let's duplicate. Maybe I'll just move it down somewhere in the center, like so. And maybe I can duplicate again, Control D, hold J, rotate snap 90 degrees. Let's go to front view. Let's adjust this one. I'm gonna take these verts and just move them up, like so. And you can even go to create polygon primitives, introduce a pipe, Let me snap this pipe right here. And the way I'm snapping things, as I create objects, they are always created in the world origin. And the way you just snap without having to move and manually bring that primitive over to where you are. Whenever you create a primitive, let me create one more time, polygon primitive, pipe, hit W for move tool, then hold V and middle mouse click and drag. It will just take the created primitive, which is selected and then the world origin, and it will snap it to a vertex on your object that you're working with. Real quick way to just bring things where you are. Just snap them over. Let me go ahead and rotate 90 degrees. Let's position this somewhere along here. And I just need to go to inputs and begin to adjust, let's say, my thickness. Let's do radius. Let's adjust subdivision axes. Maybe let's do 32. And just find the right values here that you want to use. Maybe thickness of 3, maybe 2.5, maybe a smaller radius, maybe 40. And just position it right where you need it. Now let's adjust the height. Let's do height of 3, maybe 4. Push that in right there. And we're creating a different border a lot faster. Also, just remember, faces that are not seen can be deleted. So I have a lot of faces in the back here on these primitives that will never be seen. So you can just go ahead and delete them. Also applies to the other cubes. Just make sure you delete faces that are not seen by the player or the renderer. And that is how you create 5 different variations of an arch window. So that gives you a lot of versatility, a lot of options that you can use to create more interesting windows for your environments. Now, this entire series already assumed that you are pretty good and past the beginner level of Maya. So a lot of the tools and techniques I showed you in the shortcuts, you should already know. If this was a bit too fast for you and things didn't make sense, I recommend that you take a look at the Homesteader course, Maya Foundation, where we slow everything down and show you all the tools, all the techniques that you need to know to get up to speed with Maya so you can model faster, and of course UV, so you can texture your objects. So get the course so you can model better, faster, and create great environments.